I bet you listen to a lot of podcasts. I do. I have a problem. I mean, I have lots of problems, but podcast is definitely one of the better ones. So today I'm going to run down for you my 5 favorite real estate podcasts. And these are for real estate investors or real estate agents, team leaders, ancillary real estate personnel, and those interested in general in real estate. I'm going to give you a few reasons on each, and I'll let you take it from there. You can find all of these on any podcast platform, and I'm going to link to them all down in the comments or the description below. If you love any of these podcasts, I'd love to hear from you. Just tell me your takeaways in the comments, which ones you love, because they're all great. So I'm going to go in any order. They're obviously not ranked in any way. My name is Jonathan Green. I've been investing in real estate for more than 30 years. I also run a big on-market real estate team called Streamline Properties On Market, brokered by eXp Realty. And because of that and my interest in general in learning things, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen when I'm driving, I listen when I'm walking, and I listen sometimes when I just need some time and space to just kind of zone out and take in information. So let's do it. These are my 5 favorite real estate podcasts. Number 1, the Tom Ferry Podcast Experience with Tom Ferry. I've been coaching with Tom Ferry's organization for 4 or 5 years now. My coach, Mike Shum, works for Tom Ferry International. I've never met Tom myself, but I understand the principles because I've been following him for so long. This podcast is great for real estate agents. Any real estate agent at any level, if you've done 0 transactions, if you've done 10,000 transactions, I don't care. You're going to get something out of this podcast. Tom Ferry comes from a history of real estate coaches. His dad is a real estate coach. His brother is also a real estate coach. I've obviously learned a lot from being inside the Tom Ferry organization, being at events, obviously last couple of years virtually, but I never fail to learn something on the podcast. And for someone who's a learner, I appreciate that. I want to be able to turn it on and not just get some fluff. Excuse me. I want to really get something that's actionable. And Tom's podcast, because he is the #1 real estate coach in the business, you can literally listen to one and then go into your office and apply what you've heard on the podcast, and it will work. He's not reinventing the wheel, he's making the wheel better. So that's #1, the Tom Ferry Podcast Experience with Tom Ferry. Number 2 is the Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast. Everybody I know has listened to this podcast. I've met so many of my friends, colleagues, team members through the Bigger Pockets website. But part of a lot of what we've talked about over the years is the podcast. It's where tons and tons of new investors go to learn about what they're doing. So I have a couple suggestions for you. They've done so many podcasts and so many good ones. It's literally impossible to measure. Now hosted mainly by David Green. Obviously, Brandon Turner was the old host. He just stepped down. I'm sure he'll be around from time to time. There are so many good ones. The ones that I talk about the most, sorry, I never edit these, so you're just stuck with I got something in my throat. It's going to be a while. But the 2 that I've really liked recently is the one with Pace Morby, who talks about sub 2 in detail. And the one that I always go back to is the Dion McNeely episode, which was fantastic. It's about how you get existing tenants to get their rent up by empowering them. It's a great one. I think it's 356, but no, I probably made that up. That number's probably totally wrong. It's probably like in the 500s. Anyway, the Bigger Pockets podcast is fantastic. This is the main one. They have several ancillary ones now. But if you're a brand new investor, what you should really do with Bigger Pockets is don't just start at the beginning and listen to them all, because a lot of the podcasts are going to be too high value for you right in the beginning. So to maximize your uptake on the podcast, you should be looking for all the ones that identify in the title that they're a new investor, 0 to 30 in 1 year. Those are the ones you want to start with, because you're getting to hear from people who are just like you. And if you really need new people, you can go listen to the Bigger Pockets Rookie Podcast, which is newer investors. But again, that's #2, Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast. Again, now hosted by David Green, no relation, even though we spell our name the same way. And on a side note, I haven't yet been on either Tom Ferry Podcast or Bigger Podcasts, but I'm trying. So that should be soon, I would hope. Number 3 is the Team Building Podcast with Jeff Cohn, Cohn. This is another real estate agent podcast. But if you're building teams in a real estate business, you can get a lot out of this. One of the things I really like about Jeff's podcast is he's very to the point, and he's tested and tried everything. His team is in Omaha, Nebraska, and he knows and trains tons and tons of agents on teams and systems, and he knows it all. He actually live streams a lot of his training, and there's tons of stuff that's available through Jeff Cohn and all of his companies. But these podcasts are quick. They're usually about 20 to 30 minutes at the most, and they just hit some top issues and then they get out. So it's great because if you're going for a short walk, you can get in a whole podcast by the time you get back. And again, just like Tom Ferry's podcast, these are actionable items. When you're listening to Bigger Pockets, you're really learning a lot about investing and learning what people do. And there are action items. But for real estate agents, both Tom Ferry and the Team Building Podcast by Jeff Cohn, you're going to do takeaways. And you're like I said before, you're going to go into your office and you're actually going to do the stuff and make it happen. I really like all 3 of these. That's my first 3. And then the last 2, and again, I haven't been on Team Building. So Jeff, give me a call. I am ready to go. These last 2 I've actually been on, and that's not why I'm saying they're great podcasts, because they just are. I'm just lucky enough to get on them as a guest because I do a lot of guest spots. Number 4 is MultiFamily Insights, hosted by John Kasman. It used to be called Target Market Insights. Now it's changed to MultiFamily Insights. John not only has the best podcast voice, he's such a cool guy, great interviewer. What he does so well on the podcast is he takes what you as the guests say, and then he reformulates it for the listener, which is why it's so pleasurable to listen to. He's had so many good guests. He recently had one with a franchisor who works for franchises, connector and franchises, John Austinson, and I immediately got in touch with him. I'm working on some franchising opportunities now. And those are the type of guests that you're going to get, very high value and very interested in helping people. And that's how I feel about John Kasman in general. He's a great helper. He's willing to have that conversation with anyone. My episode was episode 356, How to Win Real Estate Deals as a Newer Investor. So you can go check that out. Obviously, I'm going to link to everything in the description. But if you haven't listened to this podcast, if it's just not one in your rotation, put it in there. You can thank me later. Number 5 is the Passive Income Attorney with Seth Bradley. I really was surprised at how much I love this podcast, because I wasn't exactly sure when he contacted me about being a guest as to what it was going to be about. And then I started listening to the episodes and I'm like, this guy sounds cool. You definitely want to go surfing with Seth after you listen to the podcast. I don't even surf, but I probably give it a try. He's a cool guy, down to earth, super relaxed. But what he does on the podcast is he gets to some super interesting takes on how investing can get you to that passive part. And he has a lot of different kinds of guests on the podcast. My episode was episode 51, An Introvert's Guide to Finding Zen in the Art of Real Estate Investing. And that's a great dovetail to close this out. Those are my top 5 real estate podcasts that I love. Tom Ferry Podcast Experience with Tom Ferry. Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast, now hosted by David Green. The Team Building Podcast with Jeff Cohn. MultiFamily Insights with John Kasman, and The Passive Income Attorney with Seth Bradley. And Seth Bradley, again, the title of my episode was The Introvert's Guide to Finding Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. I actually have a new podcast. It is hopefully dropping on February 1st as we are beginning to record this week. It's called Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, which is my off-market real estate investor educational brand. I'm actually going to link up top to that YouTube video, which explains Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. But that's it. That podcast is dropping soon. And hopefully I'm going to have all of these people as guests on my podcast. Look for all the links below. If you haven't listened to all 5 of these, again, for agents, Tom Ferry and Team Building Podcasts with Jeff Cohn. For investors, hit all of these: Bigger Pockets, Passive Income Attorney, MultiFamily Insights. Get your earbuds ready. You're going to thank me. See ya.